So firstly, my name's Josh. I'm lead engineer at Travelex, and I had to do the kind of plug beforehand. We've got jobs open, so apply if you guys are interested in what we're talking about. So basically, my talk's going to be on API specifications, and specifically Graphql and comparing it to REST, but specifically REST JSON API, which is a implementation of REST or specification of a REST API. So first of all, who knows JSON API? Few people. Who knows GraphQL and has used GraphQL? A lot less people. Who's shitting themselves because I've never spoken in front of this many people? So yeah, that's just me. So the overview I'll be doing is I'll quickly go through JSON API description. I'll then go through what it looks like in Java. Go through GraphQL description, then GraphQL in Java, and then basically do a slight comparison of the two. So, first one, JSON API specific definition. On JSON API website, they've got, this is their definition. It's very long-winded. It's basically just a nice way of saying it's a nice specification for REST API design. And that's basically what it is. So, I'm gonna, hopefully, feel free to ask me any questions. I'm going to go through on Postman, and feel free to ask any questions if it's confusing, because I'm not really expecting you guys to know anything really before about JSON API or GraphQL, so feel free to ask questions during it. So, first of all, this is creating a beer. This is how you would create a beer resource with JSON API. So, it's a post. You've got these three kind of main parts of a request. You've got data, which is the data of the request. You've got the type, which is the type of the resource that you're creating, which is also obviously in the URL. And then you've got attributes, which are the attributes of the resource you're trying to create. This is what, shit. This is the response. Obviously, it's server-side generates an ID, comes back with the attributes that you've requested. So this is an example of creating so say you've got a beer and you want to link it to a brewery that has made that beer. What you do is you use these things called relationships, and this is basically saying I'm creating a beer called IPA as a style, and it's related to brewery 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which already exists in the system. The response comes back with basically the links to that brewery that it's already linked, and also the generated ID on. So I'll quickly do a demo on some of the other JSON API examples. You guys can see that. So if you want to create a brewery, same thing. Comes back ID, all the links, a relationship to the beers. If you want to create a beer on a brewery, you've got, it's an alternative to the way I did the relationships before. So instead of it being an already existing brewery and you wanting to link it, this is basically saying to brewery 1, I want to create a beer resource, and the body is just the resource, the beer resource. So if you want to fetch beers, obviously it's a get, there's no request body. Comes back with all the beers, beer 2, I basically listed it. Get beer with filter, so JSON API has filtering, as by default you should be able to filter on all parameters. So in this situation I'm basically saying give me all the beers with the style of IPA, and that'll come back with only beers of the IPA. You can also do like greater than, less than, like. You can have basically these different ways of filtering.
Regex?
I'm not sure. I mean, you can implement that as well. It's not really closed down, I don't think so. So if you wanted to, this is an example of including a relationship or the resource that's related to this beer. In this situation, you're saying, give me beer 2 and include the brewery on this response. And that comes back with beer 2, all the details of that beer, and then underneath it has the included resource, the brewery that it's related to, and all the attributes that are included on that one. Okay, the next one, is there any questions so far? All make sense? Cool. So the next one's beer page, so JSON API has paging. In this situation, you're basically saying, I want a limit of 1 per page, and give me the first page, basically. Comes back with the first in the list. And that's kind of a very, very quick overview of JSON API and some of the use cases and different ways you can use it. Okay. So what does JSON API look like in Java? So there's a few options. You can basically do it yourself, do it all yourself from controllers and then having all these objects like the data, the attributes and all that kind of thing, but it's very heavyweight. And if you want to implement everything, which means I want to be able to query by every attribute, I want to be able to patch every resource, I want to be able to post for every resource, it's very heavyweight. But there are a few libraries if you do really want to, which is JSON API Converter. Query DSL can be used to basically help with the querying of data, and Spring HTOS if you want to use that for link generation. But the best thing to do, well, the ideal thing to do if you're lazy, is using crump. Definitely not using crump, but using a framework. And there's a few frameworks. I'm sure people yell out if you've got any ideas of other frameworks that we've got that there are out there. But the two main ones that I know about is crump, which is a Catharsis successor, which is basically the same thing, but just it was forked and then enhanced. And I'm going to do a demo of this one. And the other one's a lead. I think that's how you pronounce it, but yeah, that's another one. So first of all, all the JSON API examples that I just went through in Postman, those were using this demo that I've set up. So first of all, obviously you need the conc dependencies. The second thing is just a simple Spring Boot app. And the next thing, which is basically the only thing you have to do if you want a very, very simple application that doesn't really have any business logic in it, is annotate a resource that you want to have all these endpoints existing for. So if you want to be able to have a patch, put, delete, get, search, all these things, all you need to do is annotate the resource with this. And you're basically saying the resource name is beers, and everything works. Obviously, if you have a database set up, you get to do that stuff, but that's separate. And then also with the ID, that's just saying that that's the ID type for this resource. Same thing for brewery. And then, like I said, all these things I went through, that's all I've had to do. I've got an in-memory database, but that's all you've got to do. If you want to add business logic, which obviously we'll do want to do that, there's a few options. One option is you make a filter, not the nicest thing, but you basically can say if it's a patch, if it's a post, if it's a whatever, you can do some specific business logic and what that resource is as well. And then another option is a servlet, which kind of already has done like the difference between the post and whatever. So that's Crunk. It is good if you're wanting to basically very quickly implement some things, but you do get put into a bit of a corner when you use it in anger, basically. Yeah, and in anger. So yeah, that's Crunk. So now I'm going to quickly go through GraphQL. Any questions, by the way? Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so you can make it. You can have two separate things. It's not the prettiest way of doing it. You basically have a translator that it basically gets injected and does the translation. So you can definitely differentiate.
Do you need JPA to be able to map it?
You need what, sorry?
JPA?
JPA?
JPA to do the...
Yeah.
Which you need it?
Yes. Yeah.
Would you describe production environment even generates so much code for you?
Yeah, I would. He used to work here.
Can you apply these annotations to legacy classes in a mixin style?
What do you mean, sir?
Jackson mixin style.
I'm not sure. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so anyway, GraphQL quickly. So firstly, forget REST. Forget everything you know about REST. GraphQL, it's an API specification and a query language, but don't think going into this is how REST is, because this makes things harder. Maybe think of it more as something along the lines of SQL, and then it'll make it a little easier to understand. So like I said, it's a query language, and it's a nice API specification. It was developed internally by Facebook in 2012, and then was made public in 2015. And I think it's now like its own independent company that does a bunch of stuff. So a GraphQL demo. Please ask me questions during this because I honestly hadn't worked much with GraphQL before, and the online resources for it were just confusing, and I just don't, confusing at best. So feel free to call out if you have any questions. So the first one I'll do is create a brewery. So the URL is basically just saying forward to GraphQL. There's no URL things. You can modify the URL, but let's not worry about that. The body is basically where it's all at. So in this situation, you're making a mutation. So either you're updating or creating something. In this situation, I'm going to create a brewery, and the attributes, the attributes of this brewery are Travelex beer and code, the name, and the location is here. And when that, it's probably better if I do this. And when that brewery gets created, what I want in the response is these attributes of that brewery. So in this situation, I'll do that. It comes back, and obviously this isn't JSON. Behind the scenes it is JSON, but don't worry about that. There's lots of tools that change it. So when it comes back, it is JSON. In this situation, I think you guys can see what it looks like. So the next one is creating a beer. I'm making the API. I'm linking it to brewery 1 that's already been created. If I want to get a specific beer, so in this situation I'm searching for beer 2, beer with ID 2, and when I get this returned to me, I want the attributes ID, name, style, and given a beer is related to a brewery, this is basically how you would want to fetch that brewery on this resource. So I'm wanting that brewery and I'm wanting the name of that brewery by this beer. It's basically the same as the include on JSON API. And that's what it looks like. So next one, get breweries. Same thing, nothing special about that one. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When we did the create beer, we basically gave it the ID of the brewery, which was 1, which is the brewery that we created.
Yeah.
Would it be possible for me to do a get breweries and inject that in there rather than give a hard-coded ID 1? If I don't
Create brewery.
So when I'm creating the beer, to have the relationship with the brewery be a get.
I get, so like you're fetching it and then you're attaching it to that. Yeah. I don't think so.
Okay.
Possibly. That's one of my main kind of problems with GraphQL, which I'll get to, is it leaves this ambiguity about what you can do and what you can't do, but I'll talk about that later. So I thought you were asking, can you create a resource with a resource also inside of it, so creating them both at the same time. So the next cool thing, which is one of the main benefits I think of GraphQL, is the recursive querying. So say you wanted to, you had a beer and you wanted to know the beers that the same brewery made. In JSON API, you'd probably do an include, and then you get the brewery, and then you get the brewery, and then you include all the beers. With GraphQL, it's all in one query. And you basically, in this situation, I'm saying, beer ID, beer number 2, brewery, give me the name of the brewery, and the beers of that brewery, give me the ID and the name. So the brewery of Beery McBeer beer is Travelex Beer and Code, and the 2 beers they make are Beery McBeer beer and API IPA. You got a question? A question?
Yeah. The payloads that you're sending, these GraphQL payloads, is there a regular JSON component?
Like as in, what does it look like in JSON?
Could you send the same, a regular JSON with the same content?
What it looks like behind the scenes is basically, it is JSON. What Postman's actually sending. It's just because it's using a special converter, so I don't have to do like what does the body look like. It's basically saying here's the query in JSON. It's basically this, but an attribute is the value of the attribute query is that. If you know what I mean.
You can look at it in the raw form.
You can. Does it convert it over that? Or?
No.
Anyway, yes, you can. Is the answer to that. So that's the GraphQL demo. The next thing I'm going to get into is GraphQL is edges and connections. So it's the equivalent of a relationship in JSON API, much like that was when you did the include, or how you saw the recursive one where you included the brewery, sorry. But edges and connections, it'll make sense hopefully once I get to the next slide. So in this situation, pubs and beers are nodes. Pubs stock specific beers, and this is an edge, equivalent of a JSON API thing. And connection is basically a name that defines the schema for cursor-based page pagination model. So it's slightly confusing and it's ugly when you first see it. But just think of this as if you want to have a relationship with a resource, and it's got many things it is related to. So say you've got 1,000 beers by a brewery. You want to page those relationships when querying it, and that's the main benefit. So you don't want to do include beers and it comes back at 1,000. You want the first 50, say. And that's all the connection is. In this situation, we've got, like I said, it solves another benefit that it solves is basically, so say you've got a pub and you want to know how long it's stocked this specific beer from. Where does that attribute sit? It doesn't sit on the beer, it doesn't sit on the pub, it sits on this thing in between. So connections solve that problem. So in this situation, you've got a pubs connection, you're saying an edge, so that's basically like the resource that defines that relationship. And one of the attributes of that is stock since. And then a node, there's always another side of the connection, which is basically in this situation, the node is the beer to this connection. And you're saying of those, of that node, I want the attributes ID and node, and ID and name. So, what does this look like? Is a request, like this I should have said. I want pub 1, 2, 3, 5, the name of it, and then I want to know when it's been stocked, how long each beer has been stocked, and the name of it. That's what it looks like as a response, where it's got the edges, because it could be many, and then the node, specifically the beer, ID 1, 2, 3, 4, and the name of the beer. So, that's GraphQL. Hopefully that made some sense. One of the options that we've got in Java to implement GraphQL APIs, you've got a few. One is GraphQL Java, which is basically an engine for handling GraphQL queries. It's kind of complex, and they say on their website, like the creators basically say, you don't need an abstraction over this, don't worry, but call bullshit. This one is exactly that, it's an abstraction over that. And I'm going to demo that one. Another option, which JSON API is also supported for JSON API, is a lead. I tried setting it up, it was too much effort, so I didn't. So I'm going to demo GraphQL Java tools.
So just one thing, right? In terms of backing databases, like
Yep.
GraphQL, is the expectation that it's going to work on a graph database like Neo4j? Because if you think about unstructured queries and suddenly you think about indexes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like ideally you would have that, but it doesn't have to be, basically. You'll see, it'll make sense kind of when I get to this. So yeah, so basically with GraphQL Java tools, it doesn't implement much code compared to what I showed you in Trunk. You've basically got to implement most of it, but it does kind of just like put a nice, I'll explain. I'll show you actually what the code is. This is it. Firstly, GraphQL is very, you need a schema. This is basically defining kind of the types that you've got and also the queries and the mutations that you need. So in this situation, you've got, an ingredient, you've got a brewery, these are the types on it. There's a query where you provide an ID and it comes back with a beer. And this is an array of beers, creating a brewery with these attributes. Hopefully that makes sense. So firstly, all you need to do is have this, which defines all the schema. Obviously add the dependencies. And then what happens is the framework searches for methods that implement those mutations and queries, and it'll basically link it behind the scenes magic to these specific methods. So in this situation, I've implemented the GraphQL mutation resolver, and it's going to say for a mutation, find a method called create beer with these attributes and link them all together. And like I was kind of explaining, is there's not much code written for you. Underneath here, I am doing the usual service, then repository, and it's up to you what it looks like underneath. So obviously you have a repository. Okay, and then for beer query, same thing. It links that schema to a specific method because it's a GraphQL query resolver. So, by the way, this was a plain Spring Boot app, nothing fancy. Yeah. So this is, I'm pretty much done. So are there any questions about that quickly?
So in REST APIs, right, you can use Swagger to document the code so that other people can see whatever your methods, whatever it shows. Is there a similar thing for GraphQL so people know?
I'm not, well, your schema is that, basically.
So you share this, so let's say you have third parties, you share this code to your client or whatever.
Yeah, that's debatable. But yeah, that's what the scheme is meant to be. You can even fetch it. I don't know what the URL is, but you can fetch what the scheme looks like. That's probably something that I don't mention in the. Krasimir's got his hand up, but I'm not going to mention in the comparison. But Cronk at the moment doesn't support Swagger, which is a bit of a crappy thing, but Elite does actually. So I'm going to quickly compare the two. Hopefully I haven't gone over time too much. So for overfetching and underfetching, I kind of feel this is a bit of a tie, apart from the recursive querying. With Cronk or with JSON API, you can, if you don't want all the attributes, you can say I only want this specific field. And for underfetching, you can do includes of those resources. You just can't do recursive ones, if that makes sense. Relationships with attributes. This is the main reason why, my main problem with JSON API, not to say that they can't implement it eventually, but GraphQL has it now, is the fact that you have attributes on those relationships. You can't do that with JSON API, and they basically suggest create another resource called pub stock, which would kind of be related to a beer. And it's just like, I don't want to, that's a lot of effort. So yeah, that's why I think GraphQL wins for that one. Again, for recursive querying, GraphQL wins because you just can't do it. Again, not to say you can't eventually, but at the moment, it doesn't do it. Pagination, I know I didn't really go into too much detail. Both are pretty much the same, nothing fancy except GraphQL does cursor-based pagination, which again, nothing fancy. So that's something I kind of missed back here with errors. So in this situation, I'm going to create a beer and I'm going to link it to a brewery that doesn't exist. It comes back with the data. It comes back with 200. It comes up with 200, and also comes back with the data and also the errors. So it kind of leaves you in a possible situation where you've been partially successful, which I understand the benefit for querying. So an example of where it's useful is, say you had recursive querying and you didn't want to fetch, there was some system that was out, you requested it, and it could only fetch part of it, then it could come back with an error saying, we couldn't fetch your details. But that's why I think JSON API, at least it handles errors, it's black and white, you failed or you didn't, not this kind of in between. So my last one, I think that was the end. What did I say? The specification, fundamental part of the talk. JSON API is so much more specific, and GraphQL has no convention at the moment for kind of what querying looks like. So how do you request something like this value? So if I want to say a value greater than 2 for the ID or something like that, it doesn't really say how that should look as a query, nor does it do that for how you want to mutate things. And the easiest one to use is JSON API because as soon as you understand how JSON API works, you know how to use my API. I keep saying IPA API. Once you know how JSON API works, you know how it's going to work. All you need to then know is how the resources are linked together, and then you can just know how to use it. Yeah. So yeah, last slide. I started off this thing not knowing that much about GraphQL, and I really wanted to not like it. But it was actually like there was a lot of features that I really, really liked. Not to say that it's ready and it's, you know, perfect, but no specification's perfect. But it's really good, and there's a few features that I haven't shown that I really, really like, especially for more, you know, front end, you know, filling the page with information opposed to, you know, back end kind of tools. But JSON API, I swear, is easy to understand. Query GraphQL is quite confusing, I think. Yeah, that's all I had to talk about. Do you guys have any questions?